Hey, what's up? And welcome to the Adventures of Jerkface, a place where we tell silly stories about serious topics. Thanks for checking us out. Each week, we give some thoughts and tips to help you become the best version of you. I'm your host, Bryan, and let's get started. Have you ever been driving down a road and you slightly drift off course? You'll hear and feel a brrrr. This rumble strip prompts you to get back on course. It's just a short, friendly reminder, a prompt. At the moment, you may not have realized you were drifting, but the prompting from something else helped you to recognize something about yourself that you didn't notice. That is the whole gist of this first stage of the Jerkface roadmap, to be able to start noticing the prompts in your life that are indicating that you're way off course of the best version of you. The prompts could be literally anything: a friend, a song, an ache, a memory, a thought, a movie, a feeling, nature, or even a bad habit. Oftentimes, we either ignore the prompts or spend energy on fixing the prompt instead of the actual problem that the prompt is trying to alert us about. Today's adventure looks at the prompted stage from the perspective of the counselor. He asked the question, prompted from the psychological perspective. The counselor is the one who studies the soul and hopes to help us understand ourselves better so that the psyche doesn't keep going down the wrong track. The key question for this episode is, are you noticing a new something that you're being prompted to see, start, or stop? If not, let's see if the counselor can help us out. But before we jump in, I'd like to remind you that if you don't know what the Jerkface story or the Jerkface roadmap are, please check out episodes 1 and 2. I would like to play with a word to get a better understanding of what we'll be talking about in this episode. The word is psychopathology. It's one big word made of 3 words. The first is psyche, which means the word soul. There are a ton of ways that people use to describe the word soul. And for the sake of being on common ground, I'm using the word psyche, soul, to mean feelings, thoughts, choices, and dreams of a human being. The word path in this context is the manifestation of a mental or behavior disorder. It's when our brains and our hearts, our soul, get things out of order. The final word in this combo is ology. It simply means the study of. All that to say, my working definition of psychopathology is studying the path your soul takes when it gets things out of order. Another way to put it is soul disease. So basically, if you've ever let your emotions get the best of you or allowed your brain to go down some strange thought processes, you're basically a psychopath. Just kidding. Well, kinda. And today, we're going to study that. Here's an incredibly brief description of how our soul responds to life. Something happens in our world, and our brain attaches different meanings and values to the perceived truth we think. Then we experience emotions that are partnered with our perceived truth. And after that, our thoughts and emotions trigger behaviors. This happens so fast that we most often don't even notice this chain of events. And if these things have happened for years, we just think it's who we are. And worse, if that's the way our family or our friend groups or our culture acts, we assume they're normal or true or whatever, never stopping to think if something's off. We need a rumble strip. I get asked often if I believe that it's always the thought that triggers the whole system to go off. I honestly don't know. For me, it works that way, but I tend to lean on the rational end of the spectrum more than the emotional end. In the end, I'm not sure it matters in this context, because where we're headed is to start learning how to use these thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to be the rumble strips to prompt us that we're off course. For some, the thought might be the starting point. For others, it might be the emotion, and for a few, it might be the behavior. But on that note, I don't believe any of these rumble strips are the main issue we're trying to figure out and ultimately fix. Have you ever seen a picture of an iceberg? The huge portion that we see is literally dwarfed by the immense part of it under the waterline. The under the waterline section of an iceberg is what sinks ships. The under the waterline section of our soul, the part we can't see, is what sinks us. These rumble strips of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors no doubt need to be addressed, but these presenting problems are only the surface, the tip of the iceberg, but they give us great insight into where to begin looking. Do you remember the Jerry Springer Show? It was famous or infamous for having guests that exploded into rage, often leading to major fights. And it was usually family members acting this way in public on TV. I have found that the soul life leaves one closer to being like a reactionary participant on the Jerry Springer Show instead of the spirit life, seeking truth and allowing the Spirit of God to lead me. The new way that I mentioned in the previous episode allows me to observe my thoughts instead of being tripped by them, which most times results in being reactive instead of responsibly responsive. When I allow my life to be guided solely by the soul, things get out of order and I start to become a jerk-face psychopath. I have a real life example of this, but I need to set it up first. Picture a chart, and across the top, you first have an event. An event is defined as something you cannot control or foresee. Second on the chart is your thoughts. That we can control. They are part of our soul that determines what we believe to be true. Next to thoughts are emotions. These are how our soul responds to what we think to be true. I don't believe they can be controlled. The outer manifestation of them, yes, but I think they're just hitched on our version of the truth and are along for the ride. The last box on our chart is our behavior. That we can control. I think we often spend lots of time and energy and sometimes money trying to change things we can't, events and feelings, and not much time on changing our thought patterns or our behaviors. And when we do focus on behaviors, we usually focus most of our attention on things above the waterline. So that's the chart. Here's where the example starts. Have you ever had lemonade? What's better on a hot summer day? Plus, the label says it's made with real fruit, tasty and healthy. Then you look on the back and it says it's made with 1% fruit juice? What? On the front it says made with real fruit juice, but on the back it's only 1%. So technically, it's not a lie, but real fruit juice is not exactly the whole truth and nothing but the truth. What I've noticed is not that we lie to ourselves or believe outright lies, but that we often react to something as if what we perceived is the whole truth. Meanwhile, it's only 1%. Have you ever had a situation where you had an intense emotions or explosive behaviors to something only to find out later that what you thought was true wasn't exactly and fully true? When added more truth to our initial perception, that changed the emotions and the behaviors. That's the difference between lemonade and real lemons. Finally, we are in the lab for the full science experiment to show how we go from zero to Jerry Springer over stuff that isn't even a big deal. I get a text at 8:55 a.m. It says, "Hey Bryan, what's going on?" At 8:59, another text read, "What's up, Bryan?" A whole minute later, I get, "Hey, what up?" In one more minute, "You busy?" And then after an eternally long 5 minutes, the text changes tune a bit. OMG. I just discovered I have a superpower. I can be invisible. Oh no, no, wait, I'm just being ignored. Wow. And then at 9:07, the final text goes, "If I wanted to wait hours for a response, I would have written a letter," and ends with the dookie emoji for an exclamation point. In the span of 12 minutes, this one-sided conversation went from hey to intense, irrational anger. I responded at 1:12 p.m. What? Was in church and the phone was off. As it should be. Let's go back to our chart. This friend experienced an event he had no control over. He wanted to talk on the phone, and I was not available. His 1% lemonade version of the truth of the event was that he was being ignored. Was that the truth? To a point, yeah, but me being in church and having my phone off is quite different than intentionally ignoring someone. His belief was that I was ignoring him, so he went into full-out anger. And then this combination of believing he was ignored and feeling anger led to the behavior of sarcastic responses and the dookie emoji for the grand finale. Hello, Jerry Springer. Let's run the story back with a broader version of the truth. This time, he texts me. He doesn't get a reply, and he remembers that I'm in church. He remembers that I turned my phone off at church, as everyone else should, and he says to himself, Bryan will get back to me when he's done, like he always does. And he felt peaceful and patient. And I texted him back and said, what's up? He said, want to do lunch? I said, sure. And guess what? We just went to lunch and had a great time, and Jerry Springer didn't even show up. Any rumble strip noises coming up? I know none of you listening would ever do this over an unreturned text. I mean, come on. But anything coming to your mind from this silly story? For Jerkface, it was his actions. He pouted. For the Romans, it was their belief and the wrong strategy. And for my text buddy, he was feeling ignored. None of these thoughts, feelings, or behaviors are examples of the best version of who they wanted to be. But all these types of things can be used as prompts to help us start to see the under the waterline stuff, the stuff that is actually the real problem, the main reason we're not living as free people. Brrr. What's your prompt? Are you noticing a new something that you're being prompted to see, to start, or to stop? Thanks for joining us this week on Adventures of Jerkface. Make sure to visit us on social media or on our website, jerkfacepodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the podcast. You can also subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Look for Adventures of Jerkface, or if you want to watch the show in video format, check us out on the Jerkface Podcast YouTube channel. And until we meet again, stay prompted, Jerkfaces.